I'll go ahead and start with introductions. I'll start with myself. Folks, I am Stephanie Zito. This is my sign name here, ZITO. I use she, her, and her pronouns. I'm a technical assistance specialist here at the National Deaf Center. I'm also a certified sign language interpreter and a trained C-print captionist. Zainab?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Zainab Al-Kebsi.
Hello, folks. I'm Zainab. This is my sign name, and I am policy counsel at the National Association of the Deaf, and I'm also a deaf attorney. I also use she, hers, and she pronouns. The reason NDC has decided to host this webinar in collaboration with the National Association of the Deaf is because an increase in requests and dialogue in the field regarding using automatic speech recognition in educational settings, and we want to offer that information up. And again, the emphasis is that this is applying to educational settings.
Today, we want to show you why reliance on ASR as a way to accommodate deaf students actually jeopardizes effective communication, which is mandated by the Americans with Disabilities Act. We want to emphasize that much of the context and content of this presentation is related to deaf students in higher education settings. However, the information can also be applied across other settings as well. While we will be discussing some legal related topics, this presentation should not be construed as legal advice. Next slide, please. We want to get a sense for who is with us here today. Our first poll, which is on the slide now, reads, which best describes you? If you are in the Zoom room, you will see a poll pop up in just a moment, and you can go ahead and select the answer that best fits you. If you are watching us on Facebook Live, please add your response to the comment section. Please note that we use the term deaf to include people who identify as deaf, deaf-blind, deaf-disabled, hard of hearing, deaf with mobility issues, late deafened, and all other categories. So please go ahead and take the poll. Thank you so much. It does seem that we have 45% of our audience are disability service professionals, followed by, I guess the next top category is other. So that was probably a mix of folks in the 28th percentile, followed by teachers, instructors, or faculty at 18%. The next category is vocational rehabilitation professional, and finally, deaf students. Thank you so much for filling that out. Next slide, please.
Here are the objectives for today's session. We will clarify captioning terminology. We will then take review of institutional responsibilities and effective communication when working with deaf students. Then we will do a brief comparison of automatic speech recognition technology and human STTS, speech to text services providers. Finally, we will discuss common concerns that we see in the field before moving into our Q&A session. Now, we might not have time to get to all of your questions. We do have a huge number of people here participating and a good number of folks watching on Facebook as well. So we will share our contact information for NDC's help team and for Zainab at NAD if you would like to reach out with more specific questions. It's important to be mindful when we use the terms captions or captioning, because they are very broad terms. We encourage differentiating between the terms. We want to understand clearly what the need is and what is being requested as an accommodation. Here at NDC, we encourage the use of the following terminology: speech-to-text services, STTS abbreviated, is the manual process of converting spoken language and auditory information into text for real-time communication access. Examples of that include communication access real-time translation, which is known as CART, or CPrint, and TypeWell Professionals. Now keep in mind, those professionals have standards set forth by their professional organizations, including minimum qualifications and code of ethics for those providers. Another service is Caption Media Services. That also is a manual process of converting spoken language and auditory information into text for the purposes of making media accessible. This would apply, for example, to films, videos, or DVDs. This process happens post-production, or for pre-recorded videos is done by professionals or individuals who are generally familiar with accepted industry standards on captioning, such as the FCC standards for captions, or the described in Caption Media's program's captioning key, which outlines how to convert those verbal and nonverbal cues. There is also the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines that are applied for Caption Media Services. So folks can have staffs, dedicated staff to this process, or have an in-house or possibly outsource this service via vendors. Now, the last term for today to cover is ASR, Automatic Speech Recognition. ASR is technology or software that automatically converts spoken language into text, which can be done in real time or for pre-recorded videos like those on YouTube and its auto-generated captions. And it's really important to be mindful of those three different categories and keep that in mind in our conversation today as well. So you're likely to see these various terms used to describe the various services, and it can be a little confusing. It's important to remember that deaf students have a variety of experiences, and sometimes deaf students are having an experience for the first time and asking for services and accommodations of their own, and they may not be aware of which specific service they might need. So it is your responsibility as a professional to explain the differences between the various STTS and Caption Media Services, and engage in dialogue with the deaf students on what will provide them with effective communication access. Next slide.
Before I dive into what effective communication means, first, it is important to know that there is a range of deaf students with varying hearing loss profiles, which means that there are going to be a range of accommodations used to achieve effective communication. The needs of one deaf or hard of hearing student may vary from those of another deaf and hard of hearing student. Therefore, it's critical that the disability services professionals have an understanding of that range, and that deaf students will all have a different experience, a different background, dependent on a variety of factors, such as their primary language preference, access at home, access in secondary or high school settings. You have to take into consideration their subjective experience. The difference to access is also derived from their access to language over the years, their access to services in other educational settings. A common pitfall to remember avoiding is the one-size-fits-all approach, which is just not applicable here. Next slide, please. Disability service professionals should consult with the deaf individual on a case-by-case basis to determine communication access and accommodation options. Both Titles 2 and 3 entities are legally responsible to ensure effective communication services are provided. The goal is to provide opportunities for deaf individuals to communicate in a manner that is equally effective as their hearing peers. This means receiving information and expressing information. So how do you know whether communication is effective in any given situation? Check in with the student. Allow them to explain their experiences using auxiliary aids and services. Deaf students are your key to understanding what is effective and what is not effective. Often it is going to be the student who determines which communication method provides meaningful accessibility. If the student provides feedback that something is not effective for them, it is the institution's responsibility to prove the effectiveness. Next slide, please. An interactive intake with an incoming deaf student is important to understand more about their experiences with accommodations that they have used or those that they have yet to try. An audiogram or medical diagnosis of having a hearing loss will not provide you with the student's preferred accommodations or experience using one or the other of the accommodations. You should not make assumptions or go in with any preconceived notions. Again, consult with the student. Ask them what their needs are. Student preferences will vary. Subjective experiences are key. More about that on the next slide. Courts have made it clear that effective communication is very much a subjective experience. So again, you must check with the student and find out what their subjective experience is. Let them tell you what their needs and preferences are. It is never okay to force ASR on a student. Never. Often ASR is not perceived as effective communication by certain individuals because of its flaws. First of all, although ASR technology has come a long way, it's not quite ready to be relied on for complex situations. Errors do happen with both ASR and human captioners, but human captioners are able to correct their errors in real time based on context, while ASR does not yet have that ability. So the student is reading along with the captions and relying on that information without knowing there are errors. ASR services tout their supposedly low error rate without explaining exactly how that number came to be. because not all errors are created equal. For instance, or sometimes the ASR can be hard to follow along in terms of comprehension. It is very mentally taxing to constantly be filling in the missing pieces. That puts the mental burden on the deaf and hard of hearing student, which should not be happening. That is not effective communication on par with the other students in the class. With all of this extra mental exercise, it often means a missed opportunity for the deaf or hard of hearing student to ask questions and meaningfully engage in the class. So again, check in with the student and find out what effective means for them. Next slide, please. Here are the key takeaways from two cases, Harvard and MIT. Some circuits have found websites are public spaces. An institution's public accommodations obligation is not limited to brick and mortar spaces. Online presence may be interpreted as a public space and would need to be accessible, such as providing captions for videos or live streamed virtual classes or online learning. Quality captions matter. The quality of captions needs to be considered. And for reasons I mentioned earlier, auto captions may not be considered equitable access under the law. Third, the need for policies and procedures. The Harvard settlement includes a more proactive approach for all new content on Harvard's websites in terms of captioning videos. A captioned media policy is important to address gaps in accessibility. Consider taking a similar proactive approach where all media is captioned, regardless of a specific accommodation request has been made. And finally, OCR uses WCAG, or Web Content Accessibility Guideline Standards, as benchmark. But WCAG does not mention the use of ASR as satisfactory criteria, and we'll explain more about that on the next slide. Especially with doing online learning, or if your institution is looking at making their online website accessible to the public using the WCAG or Web Content Accessibility Guidelines standards, we encourage you to review the links on the website. ASR is not mentioned in the success criterion. However, CART, or real-time captioning, is consistently used for live captioning references. And they go so far as to define real-time captioning as a service provided by a trained human operator. And that is what effective communication needs. The next slide, I'll turn it back over to Zito.
Thank you, Zainab. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to take the time to provide a demo. Recently, NDC was contacted by a deaf student in a pharmacy technician program, indicating that they were having difficulties getting access and that their institution was providing ASR access, automatic speech recognition, to their online live courses. And that the errors were not easy to follow, and that the student feared with their struggles that they would fail the course because of the ASR. And so now we would like to give you that experience and experience what deaf students who are given ASR to access their courses go through. We found a very basic pharmacology lecture and ran that audio through several ASR programs. What you're about to view is a video of the ASR transcribed words. There is no audio, no sound, which means that you must rely on the captions for information. Pay close attention since there will be a poll after the video. Next slide, please. And we can play the video. Zainab, why don't you and I close our windows so that the video is enlarged?
We want to see if you are able to understand that lecture content using those ASR captions. Put yourself into the shoes of the deaf and hard of hearing student. Would you be able to pass the class quiz? Go ahead and take this poll, please. Okay, so most of you picked C, APAC. We'll show the actual answer for this question, which is on the next slide. The correct answer is, next slide, please, B, APAP, APAP as in Paul. So you can see the ASR errors did not convey this information in a successful way. Clearly some issues with ASR. Next slide, please. We also have a human-generated transcript for reference, if you're wondering what the difference might be between ASR and a human doing the work. That link will show up in a later slide for reference. You can see the differences for yourself. Again, put yourself in the shoes of a deaf or hard of hearing student trying to pass a class relying on the ASR version, and you only just had this experience with one question. Imagine if it was an entire content. Next slide, Zito, please.
At some point during the recent video we just showed, you were possibly frustrated with not having access to the original message. And you probably also found yourself unable to follow the cadence of the class or understood what was going on. For example, questions were answered by students in class, but you would not have been able to tell that through the ASR caption. The common errors in the automatic speech recognition also led to many misunderstandings. Let's take a look at what common errors occur with this technology. Next slide, please. NDC did a review of existing literature on ASR, and the research shows that ASR often does not typically include proper grammar and punctuation marks, multiple speaker identification, or speaking changes, technical vocabulary like jargon or proper nouns, again, are often not included by ASR technology or services. Neither are homonym differentiation, words that either sound the same or are spelled the same but have different meanings. Often missed as well are environmental sounds or background noises. Each automatic speech recognition program also differs in ability to handle information and will differ depending on the setting, on the speaker involved, and the quality of the sound available. Next, I want you to see how even the smallest of errors can make a huge impact on communication. Next slide, please. Folks, I'll give you a few seconds to go ahead and review the slide for a moment. You can see there's ASR on the left, and then you have a human transcription service or a speech-to-text service on the right. Go ahead and take a look at both of those and compare each column. For the first line, you can see one word completely changes the meaning. That would leave doubt in a student's mind. Can it or can't it? How would the student know the difference? Again, talking about homonyms, words that sound similar are often mistaken by ASR services, and that impacts the meaning, as you can see in the example there. Also, technical jargon, which is an example that we see quite often, is not caught or translated with ASR services. Punctuation, another extremely important piece. For example, let's eat grandma or let's eat grandma. Speaker identification and breaks, along with the ability to switch between words that are being spoken, is not shown clearly in ASR versus the way it is clearly demonstrated by STTS, speech-to-text service providers. Next slide, please.
As a refresher, public post-secondary institutions are covered by Title II of the ADA. Private post-secondary institutions, including for-profit schools, are covered by Title III of the ADA. Both are covered by Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act if they receive any federal funding. But to escape these legal obligations, often entities will claim undue burden as an excuse. Undue burden means significant difficulty, or expense. However, undue burden is extremely difficult to prove. It is a very high standard. Determining that a request would result in such a hardship must be made by the president of the post-secondary institution or their designee after considering all the resources available to the institution as a whole, not the specific academic department or the Disability Resource Office. A written statement summarizing the process and providing the rationale must be available for review. This argument is very rarely successful. Next slide, please. These are some of the common concerns that we often see. Again, undue burden, as I said earlier, is very hard to prove. And again, it's not just about the department's budget, but rather the overall budget of the university or college. The NAD has been advocating that entities establish a communication access fund, which we refer to as a CAF, as a solution. What this means is that the university or college would set aside a specific fund in the budget solely devoted to communication access services. That would help universities and colleges proactively prepare for the costs of accommodations and removes any financial considerations or disincentives from the process. It makes financial as well as practical sense and will help ensure effective communication. Policies and procedures, especially for the first-time deaf student. Don't wait until the last minute, folks. Be proactive. Be sure to engage in an interactive process with the deaf student. And don't just check once the services have been arranged. Instead, continually check in with the student to make sure that it continues to be effective. If these appropriate steps are not taken, you run the risk of potential legal action or an OCR complaint from the student. Next slide, please. You may be wondering if ASR is ever appropriate. There are situations where it can be used, for example, to transcribe videos. ASR can cut down on the transcribing process by creating a base transcript that will later be edited, cleaned up for the final captioning track on videos. Many institutions have been using tools like the YouTube auto-generated captioning software, then subsequently fixing them to be accurate in order to provide access. Well, what do you do if a student requests ASR, for example? Title II says that you should give primary consideration to a student's request. However, it is important to remember that many students may be requesting accommodations for the first time and may not be fully aware of their options and the potential risks of using an ASR program to access their education. Inform students of their options. Provide a disclaimer on the accuracy of ASR and keep checking in with them. Leave the option available to change accommodations as soon as possible if ASR is not working out for them. Deaf students may sometimes use ASR as a tool to self-accommodate in various scenarios where an interpreter or a speech-to-text professional may not be readily available. For example, a last-minute walk-in appointment, meeting with friends, discussing an issue with their RA. As long as the deaf student is comfortable using and relying on this technology, let the deaf student choose for themselves. And keep in mind, the deaf student might be comfortable using ASR in certain limited situations, but not in every situation. Using ASR in some ad hoc situations does not mean that it would be effective in the classroom and does not preclude requesting professional services for the classroom. Next slide, please. We have another poll for you. We wanted to make sure that you walk away from this webinar with the correct understanding of what we've been cautioning today. Please launch the poll. We'll go ahead and pull the poll up. While we're waiting, I'll go ahead and read the question of the poll. What is the most important consideration when coordinating accommodations with deaf students? A, departmental budget. B, effective communication / subjective experience. C, faculty preparedness. D, documentation of hearing loss. Oh, and there is the poll. Okay, well, most of you have been paying attention. You got it right. That's fabulous. 98% of you selected the right answer, which is B, effective communication and subjective experience. Good job, everybody. A+ for the class. Over to you, Zito.
Yes, thank you, Zainab. Next slide, please. And at this point, we're ready to open up the Q&A box. Now, just a quick reminder, if you have any questions, you can submit them through the Q&A box. And if you do see a question that you are interested in also asking and it's already listed, go ahead and click on the upvote button, which is the thumbs up button, and that will reprioritize the questions. I'll go ahead and start with the first question. Next slide, please. If you could just back the slides up just a second. We'll give it just a second.
We can probably translate the question that came in. It said, I'm a hard of hearing student. I have accommodations for live captions and caption media. My instructors settle for ASR or don't add captions at all to their recorded lectures. And the question is there a way to reduce the labor of getting instructors to comply throughout the term. And now we do have it up on the slide. Perfect. Zito.
This is Zito. Thank you so much, Zainab. Let's start with the fact that it's not the student's responsibility to chase around the providers in order to implement their accommodation. Now, if an accommodation is approved through the Disability Services Office, then it's the institution's responsibility overall to make sure that those accommodations are implemented appropriately. We do have some options that we can share with you. The Disability Services Office should be prepared to offer STTS, a qualified speech-to-text provider, whether it be in face-to-face or online courses, with either an in-house captionist or a third-party contracted captionist. The instructor should be prepared to submit information and content for the class in a timely manner so that the captionist can have access to it. Like Zainab mentioned, setting up a policy and procedure is critical. Otherwise, with no plans, people are lost and in the blue, and it becomes an ad hoc moment of confusion. And that doesn't have to be that way. Students also do have a right to file a grievance with the Disability Services Office, to the ADA coordinator of the Institute, and if necessary to the OCR, which is the Office of Civil Rights, if those issues are not resolved. So it is important that everyone be aware and familiar with their responsibilities and roles in making sure that accommodations are implemented, whether it be in the Disability Services Office or someone in the institution. We must make sure that the class material or course material is accessible to those students. Zainab, would you like to add anything to that?
So you covered it all.
Thank you. And we can move forward with the next slide.
Yeah, I can share this question as well. I have it pulled up. The next question that came in is, can ASR be used as emergency backup if a service provider doesn't show or there's a last minute request that has no CART, CPRINT, or TypeWell availability until one is found? I'm happy to answer that question. ASR can be used as a stopgap measure in some situations, but again, you want to consult with the student, explain the situation, and ask them how they want to handle this emergency situation. They might have another solution in mind. They might talk with their instructor and get permission to record the particular lecture or event, and then have ASR that is cleaned up by the office later. So you want to brainstorm solutions together and engage with the student, involve them in the decision-making process. Consulting with the student applies from A to Z, whether it's a planned event or an emergency situation. Next slide, over to you, Zito.
The next question asks if colleges should provide both American Sign Language interpreters as well as CART captioning for live meetings when no accommodations have been requested. For that type of situation, several things do come to mind. If the meeting is a public meeting that is accessible to members of the public, best practices would dictate that an accommodation be provided, something like CART or ASL, because if it is a public event, you could have anyone from the community joining. And those events can also be set up by request. Like, for example, if you have a registration form for the public to fill, that accommodation can be made through that request registration form. However, providing those services will allow you to save some time and not have to rush at the last minute to organize and schedule those services. And it's fitting for a large public gathering as well. Again, best practices dictate to provide American Sign Language interpreting as well as CART. Remember that effective communication depends on each individual and is a case-by-case basis. So it's nice to provide those options to your audience, especially if it's advertised and included in the advertising that those accommodations are provided. Or if you have an event that also requires registration, then you can have a registration form where that information is captured so that you can provide those services. The goal again is to provide effective communication for folks who use American Sign Language and also people who use caption services. Zainab, is there anything you'd like to add?
Nope, I have nothing to add.
Okay, thank you. We'll move along to the next question then.
The next question reads, do you foresee a problem with stating that for live remote sessions, live captioning must be used instead of requesting closed captioning after the fact for the entire class? I can see an occasional request for closed captioning, but by not providing live captioning, doesn't that seem like equal access hasn't been met? We might need to clarify from the questioner the intent of this question. So I imagine these are two situations. So there is a situation where a deaf or hard of hearing student is in class and they have captioning student services for themselves as a student in that class. Another situation I'm imagining is there's a live public event. So if it's a live public event, then captioning should be available for everybody. If it's a classroom setting, a lecture, again, it's going to go back to that individual student and their requests for effective accommodations for their particular needs and situation. So again, let's disaggregate that question. It looks like we are conflating two different situations in this question. Zito, do you have anything to add?
I think it's important to remember the difference between STS, speech to text services, and real-time captioning. For example, if you have an online lecture that is like we're doing now via Zoom, and the professor or instructor decides to record that session, and if the deaf student is receiving CART or CPrint or another STTS service during the live session and wants to watch that recorded session, you want to make sure that captions are available on that recording as well, because many institutes use a transcript produced by the STTS service and add those captions to those videos as necessary. So that's also something to take into consideration. Zainab, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to add another clarifying question I think that we need to make here, which is for remote sessions, and it depends on the user, how they're using captioning. So if there's a deaf or hard of hearing student, if I need to see the captions, for example, I, first of all, turn them on, assuming that they've been enabled. If another student does not want to see the captioning, they don't see them. So they can be turned on in the background, so to speak, and then people can access or not access them as they wish. And really that benefits everybody, because it can benefit you for note taking. It can benefit you if you've missed something in that moment, even if you have full auditory access. So having captions available for live remote sessions is beneficial really for everybody tuning in. Again, it's going to be up to the user whether they enable it on their own device and see those captions or not.
This is Zito speaking. And if you would like further clarification, you can also reach out to NDC's help team as well. And I think we may have time for one more question. So we'll move forward to the next slide.
The question on the next slide reads, an auto captioning vendor claims there are no legal standards for minimum delays and accuracy of auto captions. I understand CART also has a slight delay. But is it true that there are no legal standards? So to answer this question,
Right.
as I explained earlier, there are two issues. Effective communication is a legal standard. I won't go into depth on that as we talked about it earlier. But secondly, there are technical standards out there. For example, WCAG 2.0, as I mentioned earlier. And actually they're up to 2.1 at this point, and next year we'll see a release of 2.2. So they've continued to evolve those standards as the technology evolves. But the legal standard is effective communication, and the responsibility to provide effective communication lies with the institution. And again, it's the subjective experience of the individual that is going to guide the institution in providing accommodations that result in effective communication. Otherwise, you're out of compliance with the law. Anything to add to that, Zito?
Zainab, no, I think you got it spot on. Thank you. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon, Zainab and the National Association for the Deaf. Our gratitude goes out to you as well for sharing your extensive knowledge on this subject. It is greatly appreciated. If anyone in the audience has follow-up questions, you can reach out to the NDC help team. And you can also be in touch with Zainab as well, as the information is on the slide. Remember to keep an eye on the chat box, as there is more information and resources being shared there. Next slide, please. Again, thank you so much for your attention and your participation in our live event today. We really appreciate your time. And I'd like to emphasize that we are here for you. We're always here for you. So if you have further questions that are specific to your situation, please reach out and contact us. Zainab, would you have anything to add?
Just to add my gratitude as well, and thank you to NDC for having me here today. Thank you to the audience for your participation, your thoughtful questions, and your engagement. As Zito said, please do feel free to reach out to us via email anytime. And so many of you have come out today to show us that this is an important issue. We thank you for that.
Agreed. Thank you so much, folks. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.